Hello, this is Charlotte Pierce, your producer and moderator for this episode of Face the Book. Today we're talking about bringing a book to film or video, and we have with us a couple of very interesting characters. I'm not sure if they're pirates, authors, filmmakers. They wear many hats. I'd like to introduce you to, Andrew Buckley.
Andrew Buckley.
Tell us who you are and what you do. Your FBI file, if you will.
I'm a simple writer and from Cape Cod, Chatham, Massachusetts, and I was brought to this by work that I did on a historical novel, and to be able to make a film, and was able and lucky enough to get the help of people also on the Cape who were very talented, including this gentleman right here.
I'm Jay Sheehan from the Cape also, and actually went to high school with Andy.
Cool.
And we hooked up via online social networking and decided to take on the project.
LinkedIn, I understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
Decided to take on the project because it was very
Yeah, and I hooked
production.
up with Andrew through Facebook. I think we had a mutual friend, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Something I saw.
It was actually a connection through my second book, which...
the Tours of Cape Cod book. Yeah.
That's right. That came out about a year and a half ago, and based upon that, I think we made a connection.
Yeah, and I actually ordered the book because I like to support independent publishers. But you published this through Schiffer. But this book is The Bostoner. Is this what started your journey to film?
Yep. That's right. In 1995, in the late summer, I heeded the call of so many people who had told me over the years to write a book. You ought to write a book. And so finally I relented. When you live on Cape Cod year-round, it's important to have some sort of creative project to get you through the wintertime.
I see.
It's either a creative project or develop a drinking problem. Sometimes both. And so I came to this because I write about wherever I am. I was splitting my time between a place in Cambridge and down on the Cape, going back and forth. And
you grew up on the Cape, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a native of Chatham.
All right.
And but I write about wherever I am, typically. And I was going to be visiting friends for about 3 weeks out in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I knew that the action was going to take place in New England and then shift there, wherever I was, and then shift back again as I was writing this. I set a deadline for myself to do the research between Labor Day and Columbus Day to be able to find a right topic. And after that, I was going to start writing it on Columbus Day and finish the draft by St. Patrick's Day.
Columbus Day. Interestingly enough.
Well, it just seemed to, as far as the season is concerned, for all the different hats and all the different jobs that I had at the time, that was the downtime. And so I found the topic in the Kittredge room of the Sturgis Library down in Barnstable. That's, that library is in the oldest building that any library is in the United States. And I found in Samuel Eliot Morrison's Maritime History of Massachusetts a story that about the first American voyage around the world. And its commander, John Kendrick, who never returned after many years out in the Pacific, never returned from that voyage and was killed under very mysterious circumstances in Hawaii, accidentally, it was said, by a rival English trader, the name of the ship being the Jackal.
That sounds pretty mysterious and fun
Well,
for a novel or a film.
Well, it was the sort of thing that I just couldn't make up.
Yeah.
And
But we never hear about this in our history classes, do we?
No, and that's the thing, is that I never learned about this when I was in high school.
But it seems like for a voyage around the world, a first American voyage, it seems like it should be a big thing. It should be...
Yeah, it should be important, and yet there are so many reasons that we've discovered along the way why the story hasn't been told. There's certainly enough elements out there. There's certainly enough drama out there. And certainly enough historical importance. This is the story that links the voyages of Captain James Cook with the expedition of Lewis and Clark.
Wow.
If
Yeah.
it hadn't been for those for the Columbia expedition going out to bring the information back to Thomas Jefferson, he would have never sent Lewis and Clark out there.
That is truly amazing that we never hear about this. Did you, I mean, what got you
Prior
interested
to this,
in it?
no. I was very interested in the story once he had told me about it, and having a production background.
Yeah.
He wanted to do it as a film, and previously I had done about a half dozen or so films, and it was such a strong subject matter, and no one really knows about it, and
So-
to be able to bring it out to the public and educate people about it as well as have fun creating it.
That's cool. And how did this get, at what point did you decide to do the video portion?
Well-
How did it get from book to,
Well, the book itself was finally published by a ad hoc small press back in 1999. We sold out of the first print run within about a month and a half, and went to a second one. It did pretty well. It was a regional bestseller down on the Cape. I did book signings down there at the MIT Coop. We did a reading at the Harvard Coop as well. That was real fun. And then I went out to the West Coast and did a number of signings there, including on board the tall ship Lady Washington, which is a replica of one of the vessels that left Boston in 1787.
where is that, Lady Washington?
It is it's out of Aberdeen, Washington, the
Oh,
Grays
yeah.
Harbor Historic
Right.
Seaport, and it's actually the official tall ship of Washington
Cool.
State.
I grew up out there.
Yeah.
You know, they filmed some of the Pirates of the Caribbean at Lake Union in Seattle.
Yeah, well,
Did you see-
they actually brought the Lady Washington also for that first one.
Right.
Through the Panama Canal into the Caribbean itself, and so that was. But I had a connection with the Grays Harbor Historic Seaport anyway,
Right.
through my research for the novel, and then I reconnected with them again when I decided I wanted to first take this on again about almost 2 years ago as a straight book of nonfiction, just to be able to bring the story to the public.
Right.
And as I
You were
developed,
kind of in the book publishing mindset.
well,
Yeah.
I felt like it was time to return to
Yeah.
the story again. I had all these facts rattling around in my head. I had all the connections. I had really all the elements there to be able to do this. And I finally, the time had opened up again to be able to write it. And so I pressed on with that. And after about a month or two, I said, you know, a great way to be able to bring this story to the public's attention, to be able to kind of cultivate the public mind about the story in the first place, was to perhaps put together a series of online videos, maybe using YouTube, maybe using Google Earth, to be able to say, look, I know you don't know anything about this story. I'm not making it up, because that was the other thing, is that people would say, well,
You had to
know,
kind of educate people before you could sell them the book.
yeah, because they
Yeah.
were almost incredulous. They hadn't heard this. Why is this so important? It sounds so important,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
so anyway.
yeah.
But if I could kind of take people from Boston and talk about the story, the prelude there, and then bring them to Cape Verde, Falkland Islands, down around Cape Horn, up to the northwest coast, Hawaii, China, and say they were here and they were here, and just be able to kind of contrive something that way, just take people on a tour of a story, I thought that would be enough to be able to get a nonfiction book proposal out there and sold to some major publisher. As it came along, however, I started doing a little bit of research. I bought myself a MacBook Pro. I went to the Apple Store in Boston, started taking the classes to be able to do this simple little task.
Of these little
These
blurbs,
short little
yeah.
videos that would be specific to whatever
Yeah.
location, and kind of link them all
Yeah,
together.
I like
But-
that idea.
But
yeah.
right before I did that, I did one more search of YouTube for looking for the names of the captains of the ships, Robert Gray, John Kendrick, Columbia. And all of a sudden I got her hit. And I said, oh my gosh, someone did, because nobody had done any videos up to this point, anything mentioning that. And it was a group of fourth graders.
This was 2 years ago?
This was 2 years ago. It was a group of fourth graders
You're
from
kidding.
Newberg, Oregon, who had been given some MacBooks with iMovie, and their assignment was to make short historical videos on Northwest Coast explorers.
Yeah.
And so they featured each one of them, and I looked at this, and I said, my God, they're 10-year-olds. making movies here. Nobody else is doing it. And so I showed them to the instructor.
Did they do one on Kendrick? Or?
They did a few on Kendrick.
Wow.
Some were assigned Kendrick, some were
Cool.
assigned Robert Gray, some were assigned Vitus Bering.
Have you seen these, Jay?
I haven't.
Good production values.
Well, it didn't. I mean, it was just the fact that
Yeah.
they were. Some were good, some were okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is, I spoke
Yeah.
with their teacher, and he said, "I've tried to get them interested in this period of history one way or another, but it
Yeah.
wasn't until I gave them the ability to do this and
Right.
to create their own take on it that they really got excited about it." And so I looked at that and I said, "These kids are putting me to shame." And so I showed this to the person who was giving me instruction at the Apple store, and I told her everything about the background of the story, and finally she said, "You know, if you want to do this as a film,
Oh,
do
she's
this
the
as a
one.
film."
Yeah.
Because I was just going to try to put together some sort of neat-to-use website, and she said, "No, make the film. You can
Right.
tell the story better than anyone else." And so I went ahead with that, and the first person I contacted was Matt Griffin, who became my assistant director. He had just returned from 5 months of a writing sabbatical in Scotland.
So
And
I know he was going to be here tonight, but he's
is,
a
he
little
is
seasick.
unusually, no, he's unusually under the
Sorry,
weather.
Matt.
Right.
And so, but
Well.
I said to him, "Look, we could probably do this and at least tell the first installment, the prelude
Mm-hmm.
of this. We could use equipment from the Cape Cod Community Media Center,
Yeah.
local access, and I knew all the historians locally and all
Mm-hmm.
the sites that were useful to the story. And but if we were going to do this, our production values were not going to be way up at Ken Burns level.
Yeah.
Instead, we'd have to do something much
Well, I kn-
more on the fly. And since we didn't have, Matt and I really didn't have much experience at all in doing this sort of thing, it was going to be much more, less Ken Burns, more Anthony Bourdain.
Right. So that I know we're going to see an episode with this. You think this would be a good time to
Well,
see a little intro?
Yeah, well, what we
wanna-
came up with was, what you'll see here is actually the introduction to our second episode, which has a recap of our first
Oh,
episode
great.
that we did.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's just
And
a little
did you
bit.
work on this, Jay? This second?
Yes.
Did you
Yep.
put together the little intro that we?
I
saw?
primarily did the sound and edited and cleaned and mixed.
Right.
And we had our
So you know
editor-
every second.
Yep.
Of it
Between
very
the
well.
editors
I know
always
that
know it all.
feeling.
Yep.
All right. Can we roll that preview for episode 2, Lucas? Okay. We got it going? Okay. And then I know we have,
On
we're
Hidden
going
on
to be
History.
showing both
The
episodes.
government gave them the right to be a pirate.
He wanted to emulate James Cook.
An American cannon scored a direct hit on a British whaleboat.
We're taking a video camera into a courthouse.
Welcome to the Hall of Justice.
We can look one other spot.
There it is. That's it. Let's go inside of the Marshfield McDonald's.
Once you get your picture taken there, Evan. Oh, you built that ship there, didn't you?
He sailed on it, I built it.
They built up an economy based on trade, based on shipping, sort of like UPS.
He was never on Kendrick's side, and you can't really trust anything he would have written.
I think this was one of the great investment opportunities of all time.
First American ship to circumnavigate the globe.
(1787 October). Early on Monday morning, we weighed and came to sail, and by sunrise we're out of the harbor.
The Monday after the state of Pennsylvania began to consider ratifying the draft U.S. Constitution, the 24-man crew of the ship Columbia caught the morning tide out of Boston Harbor. Commanded by John Kendrick,